Welcome back, guys. We're continuing our coverage of the Mahri Collab, which was such a fantastic collab, and you guys thoroughly enjoyed the first episode, so here's some more. This time we're focusing on the Toa from the Mahri Collab, and these revamps of them are absolutely incredible. Now, on this show, we like to spotlight Bionicle mocks from across the community to inspire you, and there's certainly a lot of inspiration you can take from these fantastic mocks. So let's dive into the very first one. It's by Patrick Biggs, and this is Hully Mahri Toa of Water. Some fantastic presentation on Hully Mahri here. It really just kind of grabs you immediately and doesn't let go. Whether that's the fact that it's got this awesome stand with all these beautiful, kind of coral replicas here with all these beautiful bright colors, all the really cool wings as well that sort of form this nice sort of silhouette around the mock. This mock's got a lot going for it that I adore. Let's briefly talk about that stand. I love the idea of giving mock stands. I talk about this all the time. I think it's such a great way to add a bit of context, but also the fact here that the stand acts as a way of sort of supporting the mock, which, I don't know, it's hard to say whether or not those wings would be a little bit sort of too top heavy or anything like that, but I certainly get the sense that it at least is able to allow this mock to pose in some dynamic ways that makes it look like it's sort of, flying through the water and stuff like that, or floating through the water. I guess if it has wings, it makes sense that they're flying. It's up to you. But, what I also love about it is all those vibrant colors. Now, I recently sorted this Lego set. I bought a couple for myself because the parts in it are fantastic. And just from buying two of them, I got a lot of flowers and a good whack of nice plant pieces as well. And I think it's just interesting to note that these days, especially in some of like the botanical sets as well, Lego packs in so many plant pieces into certain sets, especially some of those flower pieces. So if you want to recreate something like this, take a look at some of the modern sets. They come with a lot of different flower and plant related pieces. And you only have to buy like one or two sets to get a good amount of them. So definitely something to consider if you want to do something similar to this, but you're like, I don't really have those pieces. Well, a sort of slight investment in a set or two, or even just checking out the Pick-a-Brick wall at your Lego store or online on Bricklink or Lego.com and stuff like that. It's relatively easy to come by good quantities of these to a degree. So certainly something to consider if you want to do something similar. Some sort of smaller details that I like on Hully Mahri here. I specifically love the knee design here. When we kind of look at the curvature in this picture here of it, it's actually quite a large section, that knee. And I kind of like that. I don't know what it is, but I imagine it sort of very much helps with that posing there. But there's something about that sort of larger dark blue Hero Factory shell piece there that I think just kind of really, I don't know, it looks like a much more sort of like muscular knee. And you kind of get the sense that they've got really sort of like defined leg muscles, which are very appropriate for a sort of like swimmer underwater character like this. There's just something about that leg design that I think is very fitting for this mock. I think it's cool. And some nice sort of really consistent shaping all throughout it. There's not a lot of gaps on those legs. Everything's covered up very nicely, especially on the kind of waist area here, using some of these dark blue flag pieces to really cover up some of those unsightly gaps and make everything sort of flow in a very smooth manner there, which is great to see. And those flag pieces to kind of cover up Hero Factory armor parts, brilliant part use there for sure, because the textures really just perfectly work together there in some awesome ways. That's great to see. These wings are also cool, and I like the fact that it's a little different from your sort of typical kind of like feathered wing design that you might see on mocks like Jafer's Taito mock that I've spoken about a bunch of times, where they're very sort of like packed kind of feather designs that mimic that of a bird. I like here that it's almost a little bit more like mechanical. There's a lot more kind of spacing between the individual, for lack of a better term, feathers on this here. And I like that because to me, it looks more like the kind of wings you would picture someone having if they are underwater and are wearing some sort of underwater suit to help them dive. I imagine more sort of like dense wings like that wouldn't really do the job, but I don't know, you kind of get the sense here that they've been designed specifically to work underwater. At least that's the way I see it, and I think it's really cool, especially seeing some of those like Namor like feather wings on the feet there. That's fantastic. Anyway, I've spoken about this mock for quite a while now, so I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's beautiful. I hope you like it as well. On to the next one. This is built by the Maestro. Was it built by the Maestro? Yeah, I believe so. And this is Jala. So obviously the original set for Jala had the little crab companion, and I do love a good crab. But what I think is really clever with this revamp is the crab has almost been incorporated into the actual body itself. If you take a look on the torso, there's these two little eyes here, And even the way that there's almost like the little like kind of teeth in that sort of light bluish grey area in the center there. So it's clever. It's almost like sort of armor that's been inspired by a crab. So it's still kind of paying homage to the original there. But maybe when Tahu was getting the armor fitted, he's like, I think crabs are pretty cool. I took part in the crab collab of 2021. Why don't we incorporate that into my armor? Something cool like that. Maybe. So you can imagine a bit of a story with it, but it's also a nice homage to the original set there. That's really cool. I love the aesthetic on this here. The fact that there's a lot of this sort of light grey scattered throughout this that gives it this real sort of mechanical look. And even the nice little satellite poking out the top there. There's something about this that reminds me of some of the like spaceships and satellites that you saw, at least in the most recent Avatar movie. To me, I remember like seeing them and thinking like, that's a really cool style, the way that looks. It's very sort of real world. Whenever you look at a lot of like space stuff, the way that they design it, it's not like your typical sci-fi where there's a huge amount of like styling and very smooth, sleek ships and stuff like that. It's very sort of detailed and mechanical with lots of like wires and satellites and things poking out of it. It's not hugely pretty, but there's still an elegance and a beauty to it. And I kind of get the sense that, again, when this sort of suit was being made for Jala here, they weren't focusing on looks and what would look cool under the water. It's like, no, practically what does he need? He needs a satellite to be able to communicate with his team. He doesn't need too much armor. He's just got what he needs. It's a nice aesthetic. I think it's really cool and surprisingly real world. And seems very justified for why it looks like it looks, which is always cool to see. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoy that aesthetic, and I thoroughly enjoy seeing some of these pieces here on the lower arms there that came on your Hero Factory 1.0 sets, and I believe in this color they specifically came on Surge. So that's a nice part use there. It sort of ties with that aesthetic very well. That's cool. Final detail I love is, again, in the sort of center part there, but also on the fingers, the use of some of these pieces, which I don't know the name for them, but they're super helpful. They come a lot in trans, clear, and collectible minifigures, so they can be in some like dynamic poses and stuff like that, but they're used in light gray here, and it makes for a fantastic finger design and a nice sort of like, interesting styling on the center of the torso there. Very nice to see those pieces used in a few different ways on this mock. It's gorgeous. So lovely work on Jala. Let's move over now to Motoro, and this is by Loaf Builds, formerly known as Butt Loaf, just so you're aware, because he's a really cool guy, but he has changed his name. He is Loaf, no longer Butt. And hey, while we're talking about Mr. Loaf Builds, he does do commissions, whether it's for Lego stuff or whether it's for graphic design stuff, because he was the mastermind behind some of these beautifully edited photos that you were seeing of all of these characters underwater in context and stuff, which look so good. So if you're after a commission in that sense, reach out to reach out to Loaf Builds. I'm not used to that yet, but I will. And commission whatever you need from him, because he's incredibly talented with what he does, and he deserves all the love you can give him. So reach out to Mr. Loaf. Anyway, this is Motoro, our Lord and Savior. He's fantastic. I'm very jealous of the prototype or misprinted piece that's being used here, which is that Malum Claw piece there, but in a beautiful like silver and Keat orange kind of marbled look there. It's fantastic. And it ties very nicely in with the Mutanui mask here in Keat orange, because Motoro, of course, in the story put that mask on, sacrificed himself, and saved the day. He did some cool stuff, so it's nice to see him with that mask instead of the original one there, because it works with the story. But I was slightly pained to see that, because at Brick Fair, Virginia, I did do a sneaky trade with Ari to give him my Pearl Gold Mask of Life. A not cheap mask, but he gave me a not cheap mask in return, so it was good. He gave me I used a double negative there. He gave me an expensive mask. I gave him an expensive mask. We had a good time. But he said he would use it on this, and I was super excited. I was like, well, you lied. But that being said, the smaller one worked with the scale of this mock. And when you think about it, that Ignika mask, the Mask of Life, it's a pretty big mask. And if you're building a sort of Toa-sized build like this, it might not work. But of course, the Glatorian Mutanui came with this smaller mask here, so it's a good way to kind of keep it within scale if you're building a Toa, but you still kind of want to use that mask. So it's nice to know that mask comes in a variety of colors and shapes and sizes to fit all of your needs, and I feel less bad about him not using my cool mask, because hey, it looks fantastic and it fits with the scale very nicely here, so well done. That's fantastic to see. I also love some of the tubing throughout this mock here, the way that it's sort of wrapping around the legs, just to kind of round it out a little bit more. It looks cool, but that same tubing is on the torso, kind of connecting to the head there as well, which again looks gorgeous. And I think it's something that's important to factor in on mocks that are underwater. How are they breathing? So you need to give them tubing like that to establish some sort of air tank or something. Which just a subtle little detail, but it makes sense within the sort of given circumstances of this mock. It's really cool. I also enjoy the upper leg design using some of these Knight's Kingdom foot pieces here. And they've been nicely rounded off because obviously there was a connection point on the sort of area where the foot becomes the lower leg there, where there was a ratchet joint and stuff, and you sort of transitioned it into the leg. But it's been nicely tied off just by putting a smaller wheel piece there. And then it looks a lot more kind of smooth and works beautifully for upper leg armor there. Really nicely done. This is a fantastic take on Motoro, and I just love what Ari has done. Fantastic work, Loaf Builds. Love your work. Let's move over now to a mock by Todoric, and this is Nuparu. So what I think is really cool about this is the way that he's adapted the shield, using some of these G2 shields or kind of weapon pieces that came on Gully. And this way you get the same sort of basic idea, but it's not this huge shield that's almost as tall as the character. So it's a nice way of sort of downsizing in that sense, which is fun. I also enjoy the fact that he has this blade that comes from Furno, but in this specific color, it comes on Jawblade. And I think that's a fun detail because Jawblade, of course, was another underwater-themed character. So I love the idea of using pieces from other underwater characters from other different LEGO themes and then adapting it here because, it just kind of makes sense. It's a fun detail there. I also enjoy seeing the little dynamite pieces on the sort of like waist or kind of upper legs there, because it kind of reminds me of the Mahri blaster, which of course Nuparu had, as all the Toa Mahri did. But it, again, is kind of a nice way of like downsizing in that sense. Instead of him having this big old blaster that he has to lug around, he just has some dynamite and it probably serves the exact same purpose. And it's the same kind of color. It just seems like more ammo or whatever. It's fitting and it's cool. And I always love seeing little minifigure accessories being used as Bionicle accessories because often those seem a little bit more in scale for Bionicle characters. Like that dynamite's almost as big as the torso of a human. That's huge. If you're comparing it to a minifigure, I mean. But here, it seems a little bit more reasonable in that sense. So, yeah, a nice little detail there, but I think it ties back to the original in some really fun ways. So it's great to see on this Nuparu revamp here a very sleek, beautiful look, but one that still takes a lot of inspiration from the original set, but does it in some new and really exciting ways. I also like the almost sort of like diving suit aesthetic of Nuparu here, especially when we look at the feet and the sort of like knees. Using those Ben 10 foot pieces there, there's something about that feels a little bit more like a diving suit, at least to me. I don't know, I kind of get those vibes from those feet. But I also get those vibes from the kind of flipper pieces there on the knees, because it is literally a flipper piece. It looks like some sort of thing that would help you swim. And yeah, I don't know, it just kind of reminds me of a diving suit. I don't really have much else to describe that. That's what it reminds me of, and I think it's a great way of approaching Nuparu here, especially for his color scheme. It's really cool. Now over to Jafer's Huki, and it's beautiful. Right off the bat, the introduction of a little bit of that, I believe it's azure. I can't quite tell from these images. I've seen it in person. I should know better. I should have studied it more, but it looks like azure. I think that complements so nicely with the kit orange and the black here. And introducing a little sort of subtle bit of extra color on some of these mocks would never be a problem in my eyes. I think it's a fantastic idea. And I love how he's integrated it into the mask as well, because, naturally the way that mask looked, it had sort of little sort of like divots or holes on the sides there. So sort of inserting some of those minifigure hands and a few other claws and different things. He's able to introduce a little bit of that color into the mask, but also just sort of beef it out a little bit more and just make it a lot prettier. And I love that. Now, Huki was always my favorite of the Toa Mahri. I know a lot of people aren't always a big fan of Huki Mahri, and I've never got why. I thought he was so cool. He had an awesome mask, and he had those cool kind of like shoulders with the big spikes on them. He had a big old cool weapon. I loved him, and I always loved the color yellow, so he was very exciting for me. But yeah, it's great to see him reimagined here in, I don't know, kind of the way I always sort of imagined him looking to a degree. It's fun. Another thing I like about this mask is the way that Jafer has built in all these sort of greeble details to make it look like he's wearing some sort of like scuba diving mask of sorts, especially including some of those ray gun pieces there, because they have that beautiful sort of ringed texture to them, which very much looks like some sort of breath mask. That's beautiful to see. I love how that looks. Speaking of other mechanical details, I love the torso here, giving him this big old heart light that almost looks like it's like an Iron Man arc reactor that's powering his underwater suit of sorts. But seeing some of these silver hand pieces just next to that arc reactor there, I love seeing those because I always used to think those were useless pieces. I thought, well, you can only use them as a hand because it very much looks like a hand. But it's lovely seeing them here where, you're kind of hiding some of the areas where you can visibly see the individual fingers, and instead you just kind of see like the knuckles and the fingers from the front, and it starts to not really look like hands and starts to instead look like sort of, some sort of grilled, greebled texture of sorts, and it just starts to look like other kind of mechanical things that make up this sort of, underwater suit that Huki is wearing here. It's really, really cool. So a great way of reimagining a piece that I always thought only really had one or two uses, but now here it is in an even cooler light. It's fantastic. And then finally, I love seeing this reimagined Mahri blaster here, which looks so similar to the original, but in fact is not. It is a more sort of customized version here, where he's used a bunch of different system pieces and other Bionicle pieces and things to recreate it. And I guess it's a little bit bigger than the original there, and it's a nice way of kind of fitting it in with the sort of size upgrade of his Huki Mahri here, who is way bigger than the original one was. So yeah, really, really well done here. One of your finest works, Jafer. Although that's saying a lot. You've built a lot of cool stuff, but I really like what you did here. On to the final one now. This is Kongu, and it's by Matt Goldberg. So immediately when I saw this, it reminded me of one of my favorite Transformers, Hotshot, specifically from the Cybertron Unicron trilogy era, in his Cybertron Defense form here. And this is one of my favorite toys as a kid. I always loved how this looked, and I love the idea that he had a bunch of weapons just stowed everywhere, and he was just like this walking pile of guns. And I kind of see the same thing here with Huki, especially because same kind of thing. He has weapons kind of popping out of his legs, his shoulders, and he's carrying two massive guns here, which, is obviously an homage to the original set, which was kind of that same concept. He had two of those big guns there, which set him apart from the others and made him really fun. So it's cool to see that really played with in some very fun ways here on this mock. I love it. I also enjoy the slight changes to the color scheme here. The original one was sort of dark bluish gray and dark green, but the introduction of some lime here is very nice, especially with how it's partnered with some of these marbled pieces. So the torso piece here comes from Karzani, and the shoulder pads here come from, I've never remembered the name of this character, but I've written it down, the Baroness V7. It's sort of the masks on the beasts that sort of carry this chariot here. But what's cool about them is that both of them had that same color scheme of a little bit of lime, a little bit of dark green, a little bit of Monica in my life, you know what I mean. But what's cool about it is the fact that they both share that same color scheme, and not many pieces do. So when you partner them up like this, you're able to really kind of play with some of these color gradients here and beautifully integrate a brand new color into this color scheme. It's gorgeous to see. Another thing that's gorgeous to see is what I believe is some lights on the head design there. I don't know if that's some cool Photoshop edits and things that either Matt or Ari did, I don't know, but it looks like there might be a sort of light pack of sorts in the head there, which is a really cool idea for sure. Oh, and also we got some cool macaroni pipe pieces there in the center of the torso. Again, kind of playing with that tubing idea of breath support or something, or it's just a really cool detail on the waist. Could be that too. Either way, I really like how it looks. So lovely work, Matt, and great work to all of these builders here. You reimagined the Toa Mahri in some absolutely beautiful ways. Really creative, really clever, unique ways too. Awesome to see. So we'll continue this Mahri collab for the next couple weeks. There's still a bunch more to cover, so stay tuned for that. If you're enjoying this, more is to come. And if you're enjoying just any of this sort of stuff, stay tuned too, because it's still HF Feb. We got some more fantastic Hero Factory mocks coming soon. And hey, if you have any Invasion from Below mocks that you've got sitting around and doing nothing with them, send me some submissions for some Invasion from Below stuff. Had a lot of requests for that, and that still fits in with the HF Feb vibe. So if you've got that, I'd love to see it, please and thank you. If you want to submit some of your own mocks to the show, you can submit them for HF Feb or just any other mock in general. Submit them to the submission email that's currently on your screen, or check the links in the description. You can see the email there, and you can also see links to all the mocks that you saw in today's episode in the description below, as well as links to my own social media, my Patreon, and all the other stuff that I've got going on. You can check it out there. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Happy building, and bye for now.